Hi friends, welcome back to Brilliant Blue Reviews. My name is Heather, and in today's video I'm going to be giving you my review of the movie Eternity. Eternity is an A24 production, which is proving to be one of my favorite movie studios. I think I have thoroughly enjoyed every movie I've seen put out by A24 so far. This is a movie directed by David Frayne, who I'm not familiar with, and it is a romantic comedy set in the afterlife, which stars Elizabeth Olsen, Miles Teller, Callum Turner, John Early, and Divine Joy Randolph. There's also a pretty vast supporting cast, most of whom are very minor characters. It starts out a married couple, Larry and Joan, who've been married for 65 years, are in the car driving to, it's either their granddaughter or their great-granddaughter's gender reveal party, and they're kind of bickering like old married couples do in the car on the way to the gender reveal party. They are talking about a couple different things. One is gender reveal parties, and Larry mentions that people have died at gender reveal parties and Joan's like, what? The other thing that they're kind of bickering about is where to go on vacation. They're trying to decide where to go for a holiday, and Joan wants to go to the mountains and Larry wants to go to the beach, and they're arguing about that. And this couple, as older people, represent the actors Elizabeth Olsen as Joan when she's younger and Miles Teller as Larry when he's younger. They didn't age the actors artificially. They actually got different actors to play them at a much older age. And they did a really good job of finding actors that reasonably looked like they could be them at an older age. I appreciated that they did that. So anyway, I'm not going to give away all the details, but in a very short period of time, Larry dies. Joan's friend, who knew Joan a long time, and that's important, Karen, I think is her name, dies. Then Joan dies, very close together. The rest of the movie takes place in the afterlife. Now, they reveal to you fairly quickly that the afterlife is nothing like anybody expects it to be. So everybody, when they get there, is fairly disoriented. And basically, the first thing that you come to, I can't remember what they call it, but it's basically a transit station. It's really basically a train station and a hotel is basically what it is. And a little bit of maybe like a convention center vibe going on. It has a very mid-century modern type vibe to it, in that all of the people who have died arrive on trains, and they're kind of like, 1950s or 1960s, if you will, the silver rail cars, the more traditional passenger trains we would have seen in the United States back then. So they arrive on these trains, and there's lots of people in hospital gowns. So that just kind of indicates that many people died when they were in the hospital, either like because they were sick or they were having surgery or whatever. And that's kind of funny. They arrive at this transit station wearing the clothes that they were wearing when they died, but their person themselves has reverted to the age at which they were the happiest in life. And that turns out to be important. Lots of adults, but also Divine Joy Randolph, who plays Larry's afterlife coordinator, his AC. She is assigned to Larry to help him through this transition from life to eternity, basically. She says you revert to what you were like when you were at your happiest age. And she says that's why we have a lot of 9 and 10-year-old boys. And she said not very many teenagers. So that's kind of interesting, because you can kind of figure out when people were the happiest based on what they look like when they get to this place. The part in that transit station is very, very funny. It's extremely laugh out loud funny. The two afterlife coordinators that are assigned to Joan and to actually Joan's first husband, the same guy was assigned to Joan's first husband, Luke, who she was married to for a short time in the 1950s, and he died in the Korean War. His afterlife coordinator is John Early, the actor, and his name is Ryan. And he's also assigned to Joan when she comes, okay? So he's kind of Team Luke, if you will, because he knows that Luke has been waiting in the afterlife for Joan to get there for 67 years because she got remarried to Larry 2 years after he died in the Korean War. And then she and Larry have been married for 65 years when they both die. He's all Team Luke. And then Anna, which is Divine Joy Randolph's character, she is the afterlife coordinator assigned to Larry. And so she's all Team Larry, okay? So Luke, which is played by Callum Turner, he's been there for 67 years. And he's been waiting in this transit area, which is something that they can do. But if you wait there, you get like bumped down to the basement and really kind of scummy little room to stay in. And you have to have kind of a job. And so he's the bartender. Then Larry comes. Now, when you first come and you're there, you get 1 week and you get to stay in like what's basically a nice hotel suite. And you get to go and like explore and learn about all the different eternity options. You have to choose your eternity within this week. There's every kind of thing under the sun for different eternity options. And those themselves are rather funny to see what the different eternity options are. And there, there's basically like all these sales pitches going on and flyers and brochures and posters everywhere and booths so you can explore all your eternity options. But they point out that there's a very important rule, which is once you choose your eternity, you can't switch. So if you get there and you find out you don't actually like it, you can't change your mind. You cannot switch to a different eternity after you've made your choice. That's very important. And if you do, you end up in the void, which they describe as being blackness forever, for eternity. Larry asks, well, where's the people that died before me? Like, where are my parents and stuff? Don't I get to see them? And Anna explains to him, she's like, oh yeah, you can see your parents. We can tell you where you are, but you have to go to the eternity that they chose, and then you'll be stuck with your parents for eternity because you can't switch after you pick it. So the whole concept of that we're going to meet our loved ones after we die and everything is not necessarily true, they're saying, because the only way that you would get to be with your loved ones after you die is if you choose the same eternity that they chose. And then the whole concept of like God and all of that, they debunk that right away. There's no God, there's no heaven, there's no hell. There's just this transit station and then the different eternities that you choose and the void. That's what they describe. This is how the afterlife is. Larry gets there and he's there for the week and he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what to choose. He wants to wait for Joan and he's trying to figure out, which one would she choose and stuff like that. And he finally decides, well, I know what I'll do because they're kind of pressuring him, you got to make a decision. And so he finally decides, I'll go ahead. I'll pick the thing that I think Joan would pick and I'm going to leave her a note. So, and he tries to give the note to Anna and says, can you give this to Joan when she gets here? And she says, I'm not allowed to do that. But he wrote out a note to leave to her saying, I'm going to this eternity and I'm going to get things ready for us and make it nice for you. So when you get there, it'll be all ready for you. And that's what he's intending to do because his concern is mainly for Joan. He really wants to make sure that he picks something that she's going to like and all that. He's actually on the escalator going down to get back on the train to go to his eternity. And that's when Joan arrives and she's going up the escalator and he sees her and then they reunite. And they're both very happy to see each other. And Joan's all freaking out because they're both young and everything. But then it gets complicated because here comes Luke, who's been waiting for Joan to come for 67 years. So the basic concept is that Joan is put in the position that she has to make a choice between, do I spend my eternity with Luke, the man that I first loved and that I was very much in love with and that died and we never got to have a life together, and I don't know what that would have been like. And so now she kind of sees it as an opportunity, a chance. We could have this eternity together because we never got to have a life together. And he's missed her and been waiting for her this whole time. Or does she stay with Larry, who made her very happy and that she built a wonderful life with and all of that, okay? Which one does she choose? Now, while we're watching the movie, my daughter and I, who went to the movie together, we're discussing these aren't the only options. They make it sound like the only options are she has to choose to go with Luke or she has to choose to go with Larry. And they're not the only options. Megan and I think of other options. And they do present these in the movie as well eventually. One option is she doesn't choose to go with either one of them and she goes somewhere by herself. Another option is they all go to the same place and then they work it out once they get there. She actually likes that option the best initially. But the guys don't. They're not good on that at all. So what ends up happening at first is that the two ACs, Anna and Ryan, kind of ask for like extra permission from the people above them and ask for a special circumstance so that she can try out an eternity with each guy for a short time and then make her decision. That's what they end up doing. So she gets to try out an eternity with Luke and they go to mountain eternity. She gets to try out an eternity with Larry and they go to the beach like he wanted to go to on vacation. And so she gets to have both experiences. And one other aspect of eternity, and this is true in no matter which eternity you choose, is there's kind of like a hall of memories. It looks like kind of a carnival attraction. There's a little guy giving you tickets at the front. You go in and they see a lot of people coming out and the people coming out are crying, kind of sad and stuff. And so you don't get to see the people that died before you and you don't get to see the people that are left behind in life without you either once you get to the afterlife. But this is kind of like a hall of memories. And so you can either see just your own memories or you can see shared memories of you and another person. And she and Luke do that. So she and Luke go into this tunnel thing when they're trying out the one eternity and they get to see all the memories of them together. You know, when they met, when they first were falling in love, when they got engaged, when they got married, things like that. That kind of ends up being kind of a key significant thing for Joan in helping her make her ultimate decision. And that's all I'm going to tell you about the plot, okay? I just want to emphasize that this was a really well done, very vibrant, colorful, visually rich movie, very lovely to look at. The actors all did an absolutely amazing job. Elizabeth Olsen as Joan does a fabulous job of a woman in deep, like, she doesn't know what to do. She's so overwhelmed by this decision and she's really struggling with it. And then the two guys, Miles Teller as Larry and Callum Turner as Luke, do an absolutely fantastic job of capturing the essence of who these men are. And I don't want to say too much about that because it'll give away things, but if you watch how they behave and watch their faces in different scenes, you'll catch things that really help you understand the important stuff. And I'll get to that in a second. And so they all do a really wonderful job. And then Divine Joy Randolph as Anna and John Early as Ryan, the afterlife coordinators, are an absolute hoot. They are so funny. And Meg and I were laughing out loud through all the parts in that transit station when they're there are so funny and entertaining. And we were laughing so hard. And we actually said later, because there was only like 4 other people in the movie with us, that we didn't hear anybody else laughing. We're like, are they like, how do they not think this is funny? Because it was so funny. It was very, very funny, which we really enjoyed that part too. This was like really, truly a romantic comedy because there was romance and there was like emotion and stuff, but there was also such great funny parts too. And even like the interaction between, especially Joan and Larry, was also very funny at times, like a married couple who, you know, would be, that has a good rapport with each other and everything. It was just a very well done movie. So I'm going to tell you right now that Megan and I both gave it 5 stars. We loved it. We absolutely loved it. We both agreed right away. We asked each other right away afterwards. We both give it 5 stars. So really highly recommend Eternity. One other thing I wanted to tell you is that there were a couple other movies that it reminded us of. This is going to sound really strange, but the 3 movies that came to mind for us that it reminded us of at different points in the movie. One was Passengers. Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence which is one of our favorite movies. We really like that movie too. But the whole transit station thing, and that they were in this other place and stuff, and they're like the only ones there. I don't know, something about it reminded us of Passengers, just in like the general feel of it. And then there's this part near the end where Joan is kind of behind the scenes of that memory tunnel thing. She's able to get into a different part of it. And there's a reason for that, which I'm not going to say. And that part reminded Megan of Doctor Strange. And it reminded me of Thunderbolts. Okay, both Marvel movies, which ironically Elizabeth Olsen is Scarlet Witch in the Marvel movies, but it reminded us of stuff about that. And there's a specific part of Thunderbolts that it reminded me of. That's just kind of a quirky little thing in there, but that's kind of what it gave the vibe of for us in that one part. Okay, when it comes to this choice that she has to make, two things came to mind for me that I shared with people afterwards, after I saw the movie. The first thing that came to my mind was what this really ended up being about was not even Joan's choice. And what it made me think of is, if you know your Bible stories, okay? In the Old Testament, in the time of King Solomon, who had prayed to God for wisdom and was an exceptionally wise king, right? If you remember the story of two women who come to King Solomon with a problem. There's a baby, and they're both claiming that the baby is theirs. And they're fighting over the baby. So they come before the king, and they ask him to decide who is the true mother of this baby. And King Solomon's decision is, he said, we'll cut the baby in half and give each mother half the baby, right? Well, of course, if you cut the baby in half, the baby's going to die, and then there's no baby anymore. So at that point, one of the women shouts out, no, don't cut the baby in half. Give the baby to her. And that's how Solomon knows that she is the baby's true mother. Because the king knows that only the mother, the actual mother of the baby, who loves the baby with all her heart, would care more about the baby being alive and well than about having it for herself. So that's kind of what this movie made me think of when it comes to the two guys. What it really comes down to is which of the guys cares more about Joan than he cares about himself. Okay, that's the first thing that it made me think of. And then the other thing that it made me think of was a short that I just watched the other day by this life coach that I watch. She focuses on recovery from divorce, which I'm divorced. She talked about how when we're young and we first choose a spouse and we first get married and stuff, everybody has certain wounds from their childhood. You know, maybe things from your parents or friendships or relationships with your siblings or whatever. And we all come into our first marriage or our marriage with some wounds, right? And we tend to choose a partner that is familiar to that if we haven't done personal work on ourselves and haven't really learned what we really want and what we really need, and, you know, haven't grown much or whatever, especially if you get married pretty young and stuff like that. And her point was that after you get divorced, sometimes, or even in the process of getting divorced, oftentimes you start to grow or maybe heal yourself and recognize some of these things, or maybe you go to therapy or whatever. And either in the process of getting divorced or after you're divorced, you realize, no, I actually want this and I actually need this, and this is what would be good for me. And so many times in a subsequent marriage or subsequent relationship, you do a better job of choosing. And don't get me going on the, second marriages end more than first marriages. Well, maybe those people didn't heal or didn't do the work or didn't go to therapy or whatever in between. But say you did. You do a better job of in a subsequent relationship in a second marriage than you do in the first one. And also you just grow as a person with time. You're a different person. You know, I'm not the same as I was when I was 24, when I first had my first child. You know, so I'm a different person than I was then. That short that I watched made the point that who was right for you when you were this age might not be the same person who's right for you when you're this age. Okay, so that's something that it made me think of too. So just kind of keep those things in mind if you go see the movie, and that might help you understand kind of, I think, what they're getting at with it. It was a really good movie. It was very visually interesting and cool to look at. It was very funny. It had some wonderful, touching moments, and it was very well acted. Meg and I both give it 5 stars. Highly recommend Eternity. Try to get out and see it in theaters if you can, because it's really visually very cool and deserves to be seen on the big screen. Thanks for taking the time to watch this movie review. I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure to give me a thumbs up if you did or you found it interesting at all. And make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any of my upcoming movie reviews. Lots of movies coming out at the holiday time, so it's a good time to be subscribed. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.